This is part one of overcoming rejection. In Islam, there are two primary spiritual covenants that are influential and powerful and affect people's lives. One is the shahada, the covenant of surrender or submission to the example of Muhammad. That says that you become a Muslim, which means you tie yourself spiritually to Muhammad and his story and his values. And the other is the dhimma, the pact of surrender to live under Islamic rule. And in this session we're looking at one particular implication of the shahada, the binding of yourself to Muhammad's example. And we'll be particularly looking at how Muhammad responded to rejection. This is a very important issue. It has a profound impact upon Muslims and their capacity to hear the gospel and to claim freedom for themselves. And we'll be comparing how Muhammad responded to rejection to how Jesus responded. And we want to get to the conclusion to understand that Jesus' response to rejection, the cross, the resurrection, the advice he gave to his disciples, is an absolutely core issue in terms of responding to the challenge of Islam in discipling Muslims and equipping them to embrace the way of Christ. Noel and Phil Gibson, who were Australians who are very much involved in the ministry of inner healing and setting people free, pointed out that the greatest undiagnosed and therefore untreated malady today is rejection. Experiences of rejection can be very painful and damaging for us spiritually. I remember once ministering in a church where a beautiful young woman said to me, "My father always told me that I would never amount to anything, that I had no future and was useless." And that's a very rejecting thing for a father to say to a young woman, a daughter. And she had actually done very well. She was an accountant and a mother and a beautiful person, but she still wore a shadow over her of this rejection. The pain of those words still, as it were, had some purchase in her life. There was a foothold that it had claimed in her. The lie had somehow lodged itself in her heart. And I think for all of us, experiences of rejection can be very damaging. They can come in different ways. We're particularly vulnerable if there's someone who has authority over us, a parent or a teacher who says words or does things that cause us hurt. Sometimes also even just the accidents of life, like losing both your parents, can be, you can receive that as a very rejecting experience, like why weren't they there for me? Why weren't they in my life? Sometimes rejection from people that we work with, our brothers and sisters in ministry, can be very painful and can be hard to know how to recover. And what Satan does when we experience rejection is that he loves to plant lies into our hearts at those times, and he loves to incite us to responses that are themselves damaging and increase the problem. Rejection is a bit like a trunk of a tree that comes up and it has many branches of violence and control and aggression, deception and coping mechanisms, if you like, that arise from it. And if left untreated, it can blossom into a whole complex of very damaging and hurtful results. So addressing rejection, the healing of the heart, the experience of reconciliation, is at the core of Christian discipleship. As one woman once said to me, if you're a Christian you have no right to take offence, and she's speaking really about how do you deal with rejection. It's true, when you're following Jesus you don't have a right to take offence because he's taken that offence upon himself. It sets us free from the cycle of retribution and anger and bitterness that so often cripples people and hurts people in our society. This is a very, very big spiritual issue for everyone. And I gained a great deal of insight by looking at the life of Muhammad from the question of how did he experience rejection, and then contrasting that with Jesus' life, and then seeing the keys that he provides for his followers to deal with rejection as well. This is a very important principle in discipling Muslims, because the transfer, as I'll explain in the next session, the transfer from, as it were, Satan's kingdom, from living under Islam, being bound to the example of Muhammad as the best example, into the kingdom of Christ, into freedom, means rejecting rejection. It means refusing to live by that grid and all that it brings with it. The control and dominance and violence and deception and the many things that come along with the example of Muhammad. Now, when people feel rejected, there are three major characteristic responses that they make, three families of responses. If the trunk is rejection, there are three main branches that come out. One is aggressive responses, such as violence, argumentativeness, abuse, rejection of others in an aggressive way. This is the response that says, if someone didn't want me, I will show them. They will suffer for rejecting me. Self-rejecting responses are another family of responses. They said they didn't want me and they were right. I'm worthless. So you have insecurity, self-pity. That young woman that I was referring to, one of the things that she was struggling with was a sense of worthlessness. So my father rejected me and he's my father, he must be right, it's my fault. Or someone who experienced abuse, that's also an experience of rejection because you are being misused, you're not being valued for who you are. And one of the responses that we can have to that is to say, it was my fault, there's something wrong with me, I'm no good. Insecurity, self-pity, self-doubt, these are very strong responses. Is that, am I going crazy? There must be something wrong with me. I've been sacked from my job, I'll never get another job again, I'm hopeless, I'm a disaster. What an idiot. You hear people saying that about themselves sometimes, and I think, please don't say that. If Jesus was here, he wouldn't be saying that. So these are self-rejecting responses. Another type of response is the self-validating responses. They've rejected me, someone didn't want me, I'm going to prove that I am someone. I'm going to beat them at their own game. I'm going to look them in the eye and they will know that they were wrong. Now people prove that they're special or they validate themselves sometimes by isolating themselves. So they feel rejected, so they say, I don't need you, I'm going to go in my own way, I don't have to talk to them. Who are they anyway that I should have to talk to them? So another response is control. Someone who's experienced a lot of rejection, say, for example, physical abuse, sometimes they respond to that by creating a very controlling life. They control their family, their wife, their children, their husband, whatever, and they set up a system around them which is highly centrally controlled for them, not very open to conflicting input or different views. Arrogance as well, withdrawal, separation. These are self-validating responses of someone who is struggling with rejection. And what can be confusing is that if someone's had quite a lot of rejection, they can show all of these responses. So they can hate themselves, try to destroy others, and try to prove that they're superior, and do that all in the same day. And it can be very confusing sometimes. Does this person really think they're no good, or do they think I want to destroy me? What are they? What's their solution? Well, the reason actually has to do with things that are happening in their own heart. Now, when someone is to be healed from rejection, they need healing from the wounds that are caused by that rejection, but also from all the lies that are attached to it, and the strategies that they have indulged in to cope with it, the coping mechanisms. They need to renounce aggression, they need to renounce self-hatred, they need to renounce the sense that they have to prove themselves, to compete with others. They need to really let the truth of God's love for them, God's acceptance of them, seep down into the deepest places of their heart, and that's a profound spiritual work that's needed to set people free. This is living out your own salvation. It's claiming who you are in Christ. And it's really important to understand that when you're leading Muslims to Christ, to the extent to which their life has actually been shaped by Islam and not just by their family culture or by the culture in which they've grown up, these factors can be quite strong. These issues can have a significant influence on their ability to hear the gospel and are significant issues for them in their discipleship as well. So when you're discipling people who come out of Islam, you need to be quite focused on these issues. For example, if is one of the effects of growing up in an Islamic culture is that you can be very competitive and desire to be superior, because Muhammad emphasizes superiority. Those who are righteous are superior. And remember, the prayer is the call to prayer is come to success, come to success. So people who come out of Islam, they struggle with this desire to validate themselves by proving that they're better. And one issue that we've seen in ministering to Iranian Christians in Melbourne, there's about 60 or 70 that have become connected to our church, and we've had the privilege of seeing about 40 baptized this year, is that they can be quite quick to be quite competitive and seek followers for themselves. So they're seeking to desire to be strong men, be leading, and that's a sort of self-validating response. The root of that is actually rejection, fear of rejection, desire to comfort yourself by being in charge, and that will be associated with a critical spirit towards others. Or don't follow them, follow me, because I'm better, I'm stronger, I'm really the key one to do it. So when you're teaching and discipling people that are coming out of Islam, you need to focus quite strongly. What does it mean to wash each other's feet? What does it mean to serve? What does it mean to have your validation from God and not from your performance or from other people's opinions or who is going to follow you? Also, if you're involved in evangelism to Muslims, it's really important to seek healing yourself for your own rejection issues. If you go into missions work and you've got lots of issues with rejection, you'd easily take offense, you're quite competitive, you're self-validating, you will actually, it's like resonance, like if you play a sound and the guitar is tuned to that frequency, it'll vibrate. And spiritually, if you're going into a world of rejection and trying to call people to freedom, but they're all your issues, then you're quite in a vulnerable place. So these are very important issues for discipling ourselves, as well as for helping people come out of darkness into light. That's the end of the first session.